Welcome to all of you to our new edition of Leaders Who Have Something to Say. This, remember, it's the place to get inspired with the best actionable leadership advice from our outstanding guests. I'm Mariana Ferrari, and our special guest today really inspires me. She's Zoe Chance, and I have to confess that when or after reading her book, which I did at the beach in Brazil, Influence is Your Superpower, the science of winning hearts, sparking change, and making good things happen. I've decided that Zoe, I'm going to call her the Queen of Influence. Zoe Chance is a writer, she's also a teacher, a researcher, and a climate philanthropist. She's obsessed, like I am, with the topic of interpersonal influence. Zoe earned her doctorate degree from Harvard, and now she teaches the most popular course at Yale School of Management, which is Mastering Influence and Persuasion. Zoe, it is such an honor to have you here. It is really a pleasure to have us with us today to discuss our mutual obsession about influence.
Thank you so much for the invitation, Mariana. It's a pleasure to get to meet you.
Oh, it is my pleasure. I'm sure our audience pleasure as well. So to our audience live on LinkedIn and YouTube, thank you for being with us. And I'm sure that you're going to enjoy every second of this conversation. And we're willing to read all of your questions on the chat. So just start popping, because influence, it is not only a superpower, but it's a super important skill. So Zoe, can we start by understanding you and how did you become interested in on influence?
I was probably interested in influence for a long time since childhood because I was shy and I felt not very influential. But I got interested in the study of influence when I was working in real world marketing and industry. I was a brand manager for the Barbie brand at Mattel, managing a $200 million segment of the Barbie brand, fairies and mermaids. And there was just so much that we actually didn't know and didn't understand properly about how to influence girls and how to influence their parents. And also, for me, I was personally frustrated at I felt like I was hitting my head against a wall trying to influence senior managers at the company. And as often as not, when we presented a new toy line that I painstakingly analyzed, someone like the president or senior vice president would just have a gut reaction like, no, this is never going to work. Or we tried it in 1985. And I decided to come back to grad school to study influence and persuasion and decision making to see how I could be more influential. And now I help other people do that too.
Zoe, and what do you think it was harder at that time, to influence the market? I mean, the parents and the girls, or to influence internally the leaders of the company?
Definitely internal influence.
It was
And
hard, right?
and since I've started working with a lot of leaders like you do, and in different ways, right? But similar
Yeah.
path, I've found that I'm not the only one, that most of us have the experience that even if our job is influencing customers, working in marketing or sales, or we're maybe lobbyists or some kind of influence job, the majority of the time we spend trying to influence people are actually in the relationships that we have, people we work with, and our close personal relationships as well. And I resented all of that time. I was moved when I came across this quote by United States President uh, Truman. When he came to office in 1945, he said, I sit here all day trying to persuade people to do the things they ought to know to do already. And that's all the powers of the president amount to. So if he
That
felt
is,
like his whole job is trying to influence the people around him, this is the job of leadership.
yeah, absolutely. I do remember when I got to that C-level position at a bank, I was like, what the heck? I mean, I'm just trying to resolve the stupid problems, the politics inside of the company, more than, do my job outside, which was marketing and, and promoting the brand and getting clients excited about it. So yeah, I totally read what you're saying. And now I know that you've accepted this invitation because you read something that I wrote, and it's the simple, smart, and sexy framework that we use. So, is there any way that you can think on a simple, smart, and sexy way of defining what influence means to you?
What I can illustrate in concrete terms, and you can decide if they're simple, smart, and sexy, is the difference between the style of influence I teach and the style of influence that we're used to facing and some of us cringe about. So many of us have this idea of interpersonal influence as being like a tug of war where we're trying to drag each other in the direction that we don't want to go. And whoever is stronger at exerting the pressure is going to win. And the kind of
Absolutely.
influence that I teach, in contrast to that, is more like gravity. So as you put strategies and science into practice, it's this process of personal development so that you're
Mhm.
becoming a more influential person, that your presence and your open invitations and requests draw people toward you and have them inclined to say yes to your great ideas before they even know the details of them. So tug of
Wow,
war
I love
versus
that.
gravity.
So maybe the power of influence, in a simple, simply put, could be getting people to say yes to your ideas before they even know the details.
I would actually finesse it a little bit to having people want to say yes to your ideas.
Want to
And
say,
rather than not trying to get people to do anything,
okay,
because nobody wants you to get them to do something. But
right.
before we move on, Mariana, can I ask you about that framework, the simple, smart, and sexy, which is so fun, compelling? How did you come up with this particular frame?
Wow. Thank you. Sorry for your interview. It's great. It was back in 2009 when I did a study for Data Monitor on the innovation trends that were going to kind of direct the agenda of the food and beverage industry between 2010 and 2020. So that was like getting the crystal ball out, because which trends, I mean, we were already living in a very highly disruptive world. So I was trying to think, okay, so what's going to be the agenda, the innovation agenda in this decade, that we were facing. So after 8 months of crunching data all over the internet and with Data Monitor, I decided to go to a supermarket, and that's when I had my first aha moment about simplicity. When I was watching a mom with her shopping cart, trying to decide upon what milk, or that's what I thought, because she was looking at the milks and she had a toddler in the cart that was trying to grab everything, and she was on the phone, trying to debate with someone, and I thought it was her mom, because she was having this heated conversation, but very familiar. And as I looked at what she was looking and the decision she was trying to make, I thought she just wants milk, you know, and they're like 60 or 57, I believe I counted. So I started analyzing simple, then I came with the smart because we needed to do more with less. And then how did brands at that time, what were brands that were crushing it doing when that they were just going crazy and growing crazy compared to their competitors. So I found two from the Fortune 500 companies that were really crushing it, and that they had people lining up on their doors to buy their products. And one was Apple and the other one was Nespresso. So Nespresso was in the realm of the industry I was analyzing. Apple wasn't. But Apple and Espresso had the three pillars. They were simple, they were smart, and they were super sexy. So they were sexy on everything they did about design. Nespresso with George Clooney and their beautiful stores, and Apple with their beautiful products, and we were all lining on their doors. Every time they announced the new iPhone was coming out or the new whatever was coming out. So that's how I came up. I
What
mean,
what
that's how.
what is it that had you use the word sexy instead of beautiful or enticing or something like that?
Well, I it's not beautiful. It is something that it is irresistible.
Mm,
So what Apple and espresso do very well, and espresso lacks the last S, which is sustainable, and sustainable, not talking about the environment. I'll get to that in a second. But what Apple, what both of them do very well is that they touch every sense that they can possibly touch. So Nespresso, it's the smell, it's George Clooney, it's the sight, of course, the beautiful. With Apple, it's what you touch. You go to the Apple store, you can touch all of their products, you can try them, you can test them. The stores are very simple, yet consistently beautiful in their simplicity. So, it was about the senses. And then there was another brand with a sexy that was what it was, wow. They have juice of pomegranate. There was a brand
yeah,
that was
Palm.
great. Palm Wonderful, right?
Palm
Exactly.
Wonderful, yeah.
Do you remember their YouTube video that they had? How they created that brand to be viral? Well,
No.
just go to YouTube and look for it, because I want to
Okay,
ask you questions.
okay, okay.
Yeah, but we can talk about the simple, smart, and sexy for hours. So,
Well,
um,
and
yeah.
frames are so powerfully
So,
influential, right?
yeah,
So the time that you invested in sharing an idea that's very complex when you describe it, getting across the feeling of it in these three simple words with just a small number of syllables. I was actually just teaching a group of executives this morning from across the world about framing, and I was sharing my perspective, which is that framing is the best skill to invest time in for return on investment of your influence as a leader. So to me, this wasn't a digression at all. Like, I'm curious about this stuff, and I think it's helpful for
yeah,
any of us who want to be more influential to be thinking more consciously about framing.
absolutely. And I can send you some literature about the simple, smart, and sexy, and examples on how you can apply it. So you might want to grab those. But let me go to you and your teaching at Yale. So, because you're teaching so many future leaders, I want to ask you: is everybody able to become influential? Those future leaders, what's your experience on that?
So, Mariana, can we get real with each other for a second and just
Sure.
let viewers
Yeah,
and listeners know
yeah,
how it is that you and I have a strong mutual connection related to my
yeah,
class?
absolutely.
So I got to teach Mariana's son Max in my class at Yale when he
Absolutely, yeah.
was here to do his master's program in business, and he's absolutely fabulous, Max. I loved having you in class, and I didn't understand when we connected. I know you knew Max, but I didn't realize that you were his mom until we were
Yeah,
talking right before this morning. So that was really fun. And he was already influential, right? And many of the people that I work with, in order to rise to the level of leadership that they're in, for me to do some workshop with them, or to have been accepted to some fancy school like Yale, already influential and whether privileged or not, on a really good path to power. And the truth is, however, all of us are influential. All of us are influencing each other all the time, consciously or unconsciously. And it's just that if we're not doing it with intention, we're influencing people by accident in ways that we didn't mean to. So we're not so likely to be influencing them in the ways that we want. And it's been really fun to get to share this book with people and hear from so many readers who have given or lent this book to their kids, or their kids have stolen it from them. And so a 7-year-old recently read it, but a number of 10-year-olds, lots of teenagers are reading this book, putting it into practice. My daughter's 14, and she comes to my class almost every year. She takes notes, she practices this. So if kids can do this and be more influential, absolutely 100% all of us can.
So that's, I believe that for many people, especially for introverts, which I read a piece, well, not only on your book but also a piece you just sent on your newsletter to your subscribers, which I do recommend that you also subscribe to Zoe's. And then Zoe's, you're going to give us how to subscribe to your newsletter, so people
Sure.
can subscribe to you. But I was reading a piece about introversion and extroversion. So can you help us understand how the differences between introverts and extroverts, and how that relates to influence?
Thank
Who's
you
more
for
influential? What do you
reading
think?
reading that and bringing it up. My perspective on introversion and extroversion is different from a lot of other people's. But before I share mine, I'll just give a shout out to an amazing book about leadership, if you haven't read it yet, by Susan Cain, called Quiet. Is a whole book about introversion and extroversion that will absolutely persuade you that we are missing out on the power of introverts. And all of us, it doesn't matter if we're introverted or extroverted, all of us can be more influential by empowering some of the introverts and helping us hear their voices.
Yeah.
To me, what's even more helpful than thinking about trait introversion as just in general, like you identify and I identify as an introvert or an extrovert, I identify as an introvert. But that changes in different situations depending on the context. And we all have a range, right? So the range might be small, the range might be big. But within this range, some situations move us toward functional extroversion, and some situations move us toward functional introversion. And those kinds of situations are when there are power dynamics at play, say. So people who have more power tend to be functional extroverts. People who have less power tend to act like functional introverts. And what the behavior is that distinguishes introverts from extroverts is that introverts think before they speak, and extroverts think while they speak, and
Uh,
they're figuring out what they think. So this is also relevant when we're speaking a language that we're not fluent in, or when we're doing business in a multicultural context. Of course, if you are not completely fluent in the language, you have to think before you speak, and that makes you a functional introvert. And
hmm.
so when we're leading and collaborating with and working with people with all different personalities, what we end up with, because of power dynamics and language differences and other things like this, the extroverts take up all the airtime just because they're faster. Not because they're wanting to talk all the time, but they're faster to speak. And introverts have better ideas not being expressed. So,
Wow.
and that's because their bar is higher for expressing an idea, right? Because you think before you speak. All of us, when we think before we speak, the ideas that we share are better. And there's a big chunk of ideas that didn't get shared that are still better than the low bar of the extroverts who are just like throwing ideas out there. So, for all of us working in leadership, figuring out how to bring ideas from the people who are doing less talking is a benefit to everyone in the organization.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for that, Zoe. And, you were talking about Max, my son, and he's right in the middle of being an introvert. And I always say that every time he opens his mouth, he says something that it's so interesting,
Mm.
and because he thinks before he speaks. So, that's great. And as a mom, I learned something about leadership with him, which is just to ask and pause and let them think. Don't talk to just fill in the blanks that, So as a leader, I believe that we need to understand who might be an introvert, and then just ask and pause and let them come up with their own words and they will say something that it's usually amazing.
Thank you. This is such an important skill and not just for leadership. I was given this advice a while ago by a friend who was working with a relationship coach. Have you done relationship coaching as well as business coaching?
No, 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 I
Okay.
haven't. Well,
Um,
I've done personal, but not relationship. Yeah.
oh, okay. She told me that her coach told her, because she was taking up all of the airtime with her partner, who is a man, to just shut up. To just shut up, that he's going to say something and he just needed empty space and time to be able to speak, and it improved her relationship a lot. And so I've been trying to practice since then with various people, not only men, but I notice that in some friendships and relationships with men that I've been like her, just talking and filling up the space, and I practice waiting. It's easy to forget to do that, but helpful. Another thing for leaders wanting to bring great ideas out of introverts to be able to share is just to simply, when there's a topic for discussion, invite people to write for a minute before then
Mm,
you open up the discussion for the group, because you gave the introverts time to
right.
process. Or you
Exactly.
could do like a pair share if it's a big meeting. So here's a topic, talk about it with a partner, and then share in the room. You can do warm calling. So people get scared and uncomfortable with cold calling. So I wouldn't do that with any kind of difficult question. But warm calling is when you just let somebody know. And so here's the topic, and I'm going to ask this person, or I'm going to ask this person and this person about it later. So they had a little bit of time to speak, even if it's only if I mean, to think, even if it's
Right.
only a few seconds, and just being
Oh,
explicit about a meeting agenda before the meeting happens to give people time to think.
those are like very practical tips. Like I love, and our audiences love. So thank you, Zoe, for that. Now let's go to your book because as I was saying in the beginning, I think it is just an outstanding book, and I enjoyed, I think, every single word that you wrote there. So congratulations on that, because I did my best on writing a book, but yours, it's like so good. So and I would want to encourage everyone to read it, and tell everyone that the book is being translated into 28 languages. So first question about your book is, when is it going to be translated into Spanish? Do you have any idea of the time frame?
It's out already. It came out in
Oh,
March.
good.
So it's a
Oh,
yes, it's available.
well, so
Um,
you people know that that you can go buy it, and read it, because it is an amazing. I believe it's your class at Yale, right? That's summarized in that book.
Yeah, it's based on the class, and then it goes deeper into the science than the
Wow.
class does. And thank you so much for your kind words about my book. I also want to just put the idea out there for anyone who's listening, watching, and either trying to write a book or thinking about writing a book. I did not do this by myself. This was a group project, and authors don't talk about this enough. So,
Mm,
whenever you find somebody who's not a journalist and who's written a book that's gotten some serious traction, almost always they had people helping them a lot. I had I had an amazing editor at Random House. I hired my own editor also to work with me day to day, and I hired a writing partner to help me draft the stuff because
wow.
I I like writing. I'm good at it. I'm terrible at organizing, and I hate drafting, and I get neurotic about it. So she and I would write together, she would draft, I would work on it, and then the editor helps. We During the whole pandemic, we wrote together and talked together every single day. And then I additionally hired 3 research assistants who helped
Wow.
me to collect and vet the science. So, and plus, I have all of the people I've been teaching students, executives, leaders, activists who've been helping me workshop the material for the past decade. So, if you're feeling like it's hard to write a book, how can I get there? Just don't think that you have to do it on your own. And I'm telling you about some of these people that I hired. I was fortunate to get an advance to help me do that. But you can find a friend to co-author, collaborate with you. It's not that you need a lot of money to do this, but my life is a group project. Everything I do is a group project because I just don't enjoy doing hard things alone.
That is so great. Well, now we are going to teach people how they can influence others to get on board, right? So, from your book, as I was saying, I loved every single word, but I want to go deep into two specific chapters. One is about creative negotiations. And I would like to ask you, why is creativity important in negotiations?
What I find when I'm talking with people, workshopping, coaching, people who are involved in a negotiation is that the biggest way that we can fail and the most common way that we can fail in a negotiation is something we don't even notice happening because we just didn't imagine all of the possibilities that could be out there for all of these wonderful things that could be happening because we didn't take the time to brainstorm in advance and get our creative juices flowing to ask ourselves, what could it look like that would be even better for me? What could this look like that would be even better for the other party? Who else could benefit from this kind of possibility or opportunity? And
Mm,
anything that you care about is worth spending this kind of time. Also, opportunities that and invitations that come your way, rather than just saying yes or no. Is this a good opportunity or is this not a good opportunity? You can be asking yourself the question, regardless of whether I want to say yes or no now, how could it be even better for me, for them, for any other people? And often the creative questioning that you do of yourself is what takes you over the line from a no to a yes when you're getting invitations and opportunities.
from a no to a yes. I love that. And would you like to share that story that it's a story about you that you share on the book about that? I believe it was a conference that you were going to say no.
Oh, when I started working with Google,
Yeah,
this was
that.
how this was how that happened. It began with an egotistical bad decision that I made when I had been invited for my very first time. I was an invited speaker at an industry conference, and I said yes, even though I was invited to talk about something that wasn't my area of expertise. And then the really egotistical part of it was that they asked me to talk about another topic that was really not my area of expertise. And I said yes to teaching two 75-minute workshops on these topics I didn't know enough about because I was like, "Oh, they want me." So
Yeah,
I was
Google.
dreading I didn't it's a conference on health promotion, and
Okay.
it's a great conference. And as I got to the weeds of, "Oh my god, this thing is happening," maybe it was 2 weeks from now, and I have to prepare. I'm an idiot. I shouldn't have said yes. I'm kicking myself. I have so many other things to do. I shouldn't even be presenting at any industry conference. I'm a postdoc, trying to get an academic job, and my coach, so I have this amazing coach, Mandy, who has helped me through the past, now it's probably 13 years of my life. She's responsible for at least 20% of my total life success and satisfaction. And she asked me, "Okay, so you're dreading this thing. Do you have to go to it?" Yes. She said, "What would it take for this conference that you have to go to be a success for you? What would that look like?" And I said, "Well, like, I don't know. They can't give me an academic job. Like, I guess maybe somebody could hire me for consulting. I guess that happens to people." And she said, "Okay, so what would that be like? Like, how much would somebody hire you for consulting?" And I was like, "Well, it couldn't be $1 million because I don't have time or ability to do $1 million consulting job. But what would be motivating, I'm a postdoc and a huge amount of money would be," I was like, "Okay, like $50,000. And she says, "Okay, so what would it take for you to get to somebody hiring you for $50,000 of consulting. And I realized, Mariana, I didn't even have business cards. So like first step was like, oh my God, first I would need business cards. Second, I would need to deliver a lot of value at this conference where I'm presenting on these topics that I don't quite know enough about. I did have some relevant research. So I did more research and then I talked to people and I asked them about the conference and about the topics and what would be helpful for them. So I put the upfront work in to deliver presentations, workshops that would be as helpful as possible. They went really well. And then in the book, I read about how after the first one, I still had another one to prepare for. After the first one, someone comes barreling down the hall after me and she says, "Hi, Zoe, my name is Michelle. I work for Google. Can we have breakfast together tomorrow?" I'm like, "No, I'm busy. I have to prepare for another thing." And then I hear Mandy's voice in my head saying, "What would it take?" And I realized, like, oh, yeah, I was part of what it takes is that you talk to the people who want to talk to you. And I ended up having breakfast with Michelle, and she was so fun and so interesting. She worked at Google, and she ended up inviting me to do a consulting project. However, I actually didn't have time to really do a consulting project despite the conversation with Mandy. But I did ask myself those questions of, okay, how could it be better for me? What I really needed was to do academic research and get academic publications more than I needed money, even though $50,000 would be great. And Michelle was also a researcher. She had a PhD. And I thought maybe Michelle and maybe Google would be interested in not just a partnership with Zoe Chance, but a partnership with Yale, and we could collaborate on something even bigger. And who else could benefit? Well, my colleagues and the students at Yale certainly would benefit if we did something like that. So we actually created this much broader collaboration between her team at Yale, I mean, her team at Google, my team at Yale. And I worked and Michelle worked with this team on a series of research projects that ended up with multiple publications, including academic publications, Harvard Business Review. We had some of our students end up getting jobs at Google. They got consulting experience. And then the magic part, and it's surprising how often I'm superstitious. It's surprising how often it happens that something that I've wished for or asked for or just let people know that I would love happens so literally. And I was
Absolutely.
receiving money into my research budget as I worked on this Yale Google collaboration for over about 5 years. And I was just doing little bits of work with them from time to time. And then when I stepped off the project to work on something else, I checked the records of my research budget and I found that the amount of money that I had received for this project was exactly $50,000.
Wow, Zoe, that is so incredible. Yeah. You know what's incredible about that story and your book is that yes, you tell the story, but then you break it down in so many learnings. You know, as you were
Mm.
sharing it right now, um, in your book, you mentioned like think bigger and better. You know what? It's just what you were saying. Then the just ask question that kind of got me into trouble because I did share that with my team. So I
Are
got
they asking you all the time?
no, no, no. I had a team member that she said, well, you know, this is how much I would want to make. And then she ended up making more than what she asked. So she read the Just Ask by you. And then she told me. And I thought she's outstanding. So, you know, I'm so happy that she got that learning from you. And I did as well. So thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Just
And
ask.
and you got the magic question that I heard already from when we were having the pregame conversation. The magic question that you heard, those of you listening during the story, that my coach Mandy is the one who taught it to me. And she asked me multiple times, what would it take? And what would it take is a magic question that shifts people's mindsets from feeling pressured that you're trying to influence them or making the right decision to collaborative problem solving. And you'll open up possibilities that you just wouldn't even have been thinking of, you wouldn't even have been considering. So, what would it take is one of the best questions for collaborative negotiations.
Oh, that's absolutely great. And I think that the what would it take, it opens up your own mind, of what's at stake. I mean, it helps you. I mean, even when I ask you before this interview, what would it take? It gave me like better ideas of how we could approach that project that I was sharing with you. So the what would it take? It gives you hints about negotiation, but also about your own project. I mean, it makes it bigger and better.
Yeah, yeah, and you can ask this question of yourself, you can ask this question of people you're coaching, and you can ask this question of people with power. I've had executives come through workshops with me where they get excited about the magic question and they have changed important policies in huge organizations that they didn't have the power to set policies for. Like I had someone come in, his name is Malum, and he was a strategy director at Turner Networks. And he wanted to create a funded internship program for underrepresented minorities who many of them just couldn't afford to work for free. And he got excited about the magic question, and he had a series of conversations with senior executives asking them, what would it take to fund this program? And when I saw him earlier this year at the beginning of the summer, he told me that they had just graduated their 24th intern from that program.
Mm,
Another
mm.
situation, a design director, senior director in New York Times wanted the New York Times to cover as a health benefit any employee to get to freeze their eggs or sperm so they could take control of their reproductive future.
Oh,
There's
wow.
no media company in the US that was offering this as a health benefit. And she had a series of conversations asking this question, what would it take? It took longer. That time it took a year of those conversations, but the New York Times then became the first ever media company to offer that health benefit to all of their
Oh, that
employees.
is that is so great. Zoe, thank you so much. I want to jump in just 1 second to our the questions that we have. One is from your student. So Diego Pineda, he comments, introverts think before they speak, extroverts think while they speak. Great way to look at it. So thank you, Diego, for your comment. And then Max, your ex-student, he goes, creative questioning, interesting concept. What are some examples of influential questions one can ask? So questions with influence. I love that.
I love that too. So the magic question, what would it take? This is my very favorite one because it's so widely applicable. And you can use it also in situations where you want to avoid criticizing someone. Like, say, an employee, you need to give them some critical feedback rather than saying, hey, here's how you suck. You can ask, what would it take to fix this? What would it
Hmm.
take to be where we want for the future? So, really, honestly, this is the place to start. Some other questions that you can ask that are powerful in a leadership context are setting your team up for low expectations and high hopes and asking their feedback on, so what would a bottom line for success be for us for this project? What's the minimum that would need to happen for us to be satisfied? Because you really don't want anyone to be disappointed because we feel losses 2 to 2.5 times more heavily than we feel gains. So you want to
Hmm.
set expectations so they don't get disappointed. And also, you want people to be motivated to be working towards something bigger and better. So asking them, so in a perfect world, what would an ideal outcome look like? So brainstorming, creative problem solving with what would the best thing look like and what would be okay. So that when something happens that is in between, instead of being disappointed that you didn't get to the best, at least you got over that s- bottom line area of success that you needed to have. Another
That's
question.
inspiring people to be at their best, right? That's
Yeah.
kind of inspiration.
Yeah, and the dance between low
Yeah,
expectations and high hopes
and high
is
hope.
part of big part of the
Yeah,
art of leadership.
low
One
expectations. Uh-huh.
final
Go.
specific question that can help when somebody is asking you to do something that you are unwilling or unable to do, you can
Mm-hmm.
ask them, "How can I do that?" And it
Oh.
sounds really simple, but it shifts their mindset into taking your perspective and thinking about the process. What would it take? Is it even possible? So it's a way of avoiding just saying no or acting resistant. And once in a while, you'll find that actually they have a great idea that you just wouldn't have thought of. And there is a way for you to do it. So,
Mm.
what would it take? Asking what it would look like, high and low, and
How can
asking,
I do
how
that?
can I do that?
Oh, that's great. So I know that you're short in time, so I do not want to miss asking you about this. The next chapter in your book, after creative negotiations, is negotiations while when you're a female. So, first of all, you say in your book that only 17% of women, compared to 40% of men, enjoy negotiating. How are the dynamics when women negotiate among each other? And why do you think that 17%, I mean, that there's such a shortage in percentage of women that enjoy negotiating? So, two questions for you.
I believe that the reason that most of us don't enjoy negotiating, whatever gender we are, is that we have this very small idea of what negotiating is that's limited to conversations with strangers about piles of money and who gets to have how much. And those are some of the most fraught conversations that can be difficult and challenging. And sometimes it's not strangers, but say it's your boss, right?
Mm.
But we're negotiating all the time. We're negotiating every single day. We're negotiating about projects. We're negotiating about who does what, where do we go, what's going to happen, when. We're always negotiating. But women tend to be reluctant to have these kinds of conversations where they feel like they need to be aggressively defending themselves. And this is the
Mm.
other misconception about negotiations, where we think about negotiations looking how it looks maybe in a Hollywood movie, and you have a bully and you have a sucker. And you
Right.
you're not a bully, so you can't just take the bully role even if you wanted to be the bully. So that means you're probably going to be the sucker, and you really don't want to be the sucker. And so when you have that paradigm, like negotiating sucks. Negotiating sucks if it's a bully and a sucker. But in real life, what it more
Yes.
often looks like
Mm.
is a collaboration and a conversation. What could it look like? How could we make this work? And because you now know that someone negotiating with you is likely defensive and scared and trying not to be a sucker, whether they're a man or a woman, it helps at the beginning to just let them know. So, one of my goals here, or my goal here, is that we both walk away happy. Let's talk about what that would look like. And there are
Oh, that's great.
many situations where women can do a great job of negotiating with each other because we are used to collaborating. We just don't call it negotiating.
Yeah, that's great. Collaborating, not negotiating. So before we go, first we have another question here. How do you know when you've successfully influenced someone? That's a very good question. What's the
And
KPI?
yeah, Dalmar, it depends what you're trying to influence them to do. And it's movement on that dimension that you would say. If you're trying to influence someone's behavior, did their behavior change? If you're trying to influence someone's decision, did they make a new decision? But the hard one, which I think you're getting at, is if you're trying to change the way somebody thinks, change what they're thinking, or change their perspective, how do you know? And you may not know, because it might take a really long time. Changing people's thinking can be much harder and rarer than changing people's behavior, which is the opposite of what
Mm.
most of us expect. I have been dramatically influenced by a series of my students who are students like Max, who care a lot about the environment. And I don't not care about the environment, but it hasn't been a top priority. When I started teaching this class at Yale about 10 years ago, I had a number of TAs and students from the School for the Environment, and they cared about it so much. And I saw and heard and witnessed the investment that they're willing to make to change things and save this planet. And at first, Mariana, I'm a little embarrassed, but at first, I was kind of patronizing, and I thought they were like these cute little puppy dogs running off to save the planet and like, "Oh, that's adorable. You go, pat you on the head." And it took so many conversations with so many of these students to have me finally understand this problem is bigger than all of us, and it takes all of us working together to try to shift the course of the calamity that we're headed toward. And it's not this thing that experts need to solve. It's not this thing that people who are willing to dedicate their life to it need to sacrifice their whole being for. It's something that we all need to do whatever we can. And so now I work hard to try to help the people who are trying to save the planet, working in sustainability and activism and sharing tools of influence, because that's what I can do. So,
Hmm.
whatever it is that we individually can do, we need to do that. And it's my students who taught me that. And putting my money where my mouth is, I'm also donating half the profits from my book to organizations that are working on the climate crisis.
Wow,
So,
congratulations, Zoe.
thank you.
That
That's
is
how much they influenced me, how
yes.
deeply.
Wow, wow, wow. Yes, that is the students that become better than the teacher, right?
Mhm.
Yes, congratulations, congratulations on that. Well, I have to say that the last S that I was going to tell you about, the sustainable, remember I told you it wasn't about the environment. But what I did realize in 2020 was that while Apple still grew, Nespresso had to merge their financials with Nestle in 2013. Now, Apple had gone through the worst crisis, which was losing their founder, and and so many, and I mean, competition is fierce on their environment. So how are they doing? How are they making it sustainable growth and sustainably like the most admired company in the world, because sustainability is about putting people first. And that's what Apple does in every single aspect. From their first mission statement that they put people first, it's about their clients, and how they manage their company. But when I came to that realization, I thought, yeah, because the only thing that it's really sustainable throughout the ages of history, it's the ego of the human being. So we do not really care if the tree falls unless it falls on our head. So Apple gets it, and they sustainably do very good. Now, to make your book so sustainable and sustainable growth for your book, how can people buy it?
You should be able to buy it almost
Anybody?
anywhere that you can find books, easy to find online. Amazon everywhere makes it so easy to buy stuff from them. It's harder for me to not buy stuff from Amazon, but I have supported a lot of local bookstores. So around here, easy to find in local bookstores and libraries. Some libraries have a wait list and people are annoyed by it. It's also on Audible. I had a lot of fun doing the audio narration. So if you
You
enjoyed
do it yourself?
hearing me speak,
Yes.
yes, and it was like being with a meditation teacher, because the director who was listening would have me stop every time she felt me being not present, and she
Huh.
would ask me to redo the line. So this was about 1,000,000 times, but when you hear it, it sounds seamless, and I got to actually really feel grounded and
Oh,
present when I was
wow.
sharing this.
Wow, congratulations on that. Zoe, is there any other question that we have not covered or topic that we haven't covered that you would love sharing with the audience?
Could I ask you a question about the work that you've done with leadership? And you mentioned one of the things that you learned about parenting that was relevant for leadership. And could I ask you, like, what could I just invite you to share what's something that you've learned in your work with leaders that also helps in our interpersonal relationships with our friends or family or partners?
I'm sure that it happens to me, what happens to you, that every day that you work with leaders, you learn more from them than what they learn from you. So it is a generous relationship that you develop with your clients, or with your students, whatever they are. So I enjoy every second of when I'm working with them, because I learn so much. And then the one thing I learned is the power of inspiration. When you were talking, like going from here, and then helping them raise their own bar, and that's when I really realized that emotional intelligence was the basic, and it had become the basics of our any training that we do for leaders. It's first about emotional intelligence. If we do not understand ourselves, we can never influence our own thoughts nor anybody else's thoughts, thoughts and actions and behaviors. So, kind of so many things, but basically learning from each other.
Learning from each other. And I was just imagining, what would it be like if we had the goal of inspiring our partners or inspiring our friends or inspiring our kids? Maybe we try to inspire our kids, but it's just not a lens that I think a lot of us are thinking about in our personal life. We want to just chillax. Like, we went to work, we did the thing, maybe we did the leadership thing, trying to be inspirational. It's really hard. And then we come home and just like get something on the table and, get annoyed by the people that we're
Yeah.
with.
That the one thing that I've learned from my youngest son, not from Max, but from my youngest, was one day that I believe he was 17 or 18 years old. And we were debating something, on a very heated conversation like you have with a teenager. And he said, Mom, you know what? Not everything is about you. Oh my God. That's when I thought about the people first, because, he was kind of letting me know that it wasn't what he was doing to me what mattered, but maybe what he was doing to himself, or what he was doing, or, what about him? And so many times we say, so this is, look at what you're doing to me. So when you talk about interpersonal relationships, I believe that being a mom or being a parent, it's one of the most beautiful, challenging, and inspiring moments in your life, because you have to give your best all the time, because you want your kids to be, at least I wanted my kids to be happy and to be good people. So you cannot teach with your words, you have to teach with your actions. And the same applies to our classes. That's why our classes are so popular, Zoe.
It's true.
you know,
It's
it's
true. And we really love the people that we work with, and that
absolutely.
comes across. Yeah.
And I think that you have to love people to teach, and you have to love the human being and believe in the best of every soul that you touch, that there's, a little bit of a better person inside of them. And, maybe because of what you say or what you teach or how you say whatever you say, then you spark that. And when you spark that in one person, and you spark it in two, in three, in hundreds or thousands, then we are creating that impact that I love, you know.
It's a beautiful superpower to be able to see the best in other people and reflect that back to them. Thank
Yeah.
you. And I appreciate getting to bask in your appreciation and positive vibes today, Mariana. Thank you
Well,
so much.
thank you. Thank you, Zoe. It has been such a blessing to have you. I'm sure that it's such a blessing to your students to have you. Now, I am really, truly happy that you put out a book, because that can reach millions of people that do not have the chance of having Zoe Chance as a teacher. So now they can have you on their book. So to our audience, I want to tell you that thank you for being here. And I want to remind you about something. Knowing is, I would say, knowing sucks if you don't apply what you've learned, because it generates frustration. I mean, knowing what you should be doing and not applying it, it sucks. So people, get Zoe's insights, get her book, and just try one little bit of her insights every single day and see it for yourself. See your change. You can do it. Thank you, Zoe.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us and spending your time with us today.
Thanks.